Welcome back with a video that I never thought I would ever make, or maybe if you'd asked me half a year ago, I would have told you I'm not interested in doing a video about hip-hop. This is about hip-hop and my recent record purchases, which were all more or less hip-hop purchases of records. You know, I have an on and off relationship with hip-hop, but as a very casual listener, and more in the sense of, I want to know, like I want to know everything that goes on in pop. So hip-hop is an important part of pop, and in the 21st century it's by far the most successful branch of pop music. But there lies also the hurdle for me, because I can't stand, for the most part, I can't stand what hip-hop became in the 21st century. The kind of hip-hop that I used to like when I was young was the 90s hip-hop, and I also, of course, love the old school stuff. Love is maybe too much of a word, but I always had respect for the old school stuff of the 80s. So 80s and 90s hip-hop was also, in my opinion, not only the beginning, but also the climax, the zenith of hip-hop. And I think it went downhill. I can't stand gangster rap, and one thing I really hate about or dislike about hip-hop is all the cursing, all the N-words, the F-bombs, the sex and crime stuff, and that sort of language. That's not just, I like to listen to music to have a good time, and to have a positive vibe. So that's not for me, and that's still with some of the hip hop we're going to talk about today. That's also apparent there, but to a lesser degree. That the really hard gangster rap stuff and the modern stuff and the cloud rap stuff and so on. That's not my world, and it never will be my world. But I had a kind of, a renaissance in my, at least, respect for the genre. In the 90s I had records and still have them by the Fugees, Lauryn Hill, Wu-Tang Clan, even Public Enemy. So I have, a couple of hip-hop records, important hip-hop records even. But like I said, after the 90s I stopped listening to it. But what did reignite my interest in it? I was in the US a couple of weeks ago. I returned 2 weeks ago from a cruise which took me from Miami to Barcelona in Spain. And I was for a week I was in Miami before the cruise started. And also visited Little Havana, and my hotel itself was also in a kind of like in the hood. I didn't have a hotel in the posh area of Miami. I wanted to, I was a cheapskate. I wanted to save some money, so I didn't really look where my hotel was. So it was really in the hood, and one day I took the Uber home from Little Havana, which is this Cuban immigrant community, to my district, which is really like from a video, from a hip hop video, like what was the neighborhood in Miami that I was in. And the Uber driver played something on the radio, and it was If I Ruled the World by Nas. Strictly living longevity to the destiny I thought I'd never see, but reality struck. Better find out before your time's out. What the fuck? Imagine that. With, I think, Lauryn Hill is the female voice. I'm pretty sure she's the singer on it. And it's, the impressions I had from looking out of the window of the Uber, the people, the area, and that song, for the first time it really clicked with me. Here in Vienna, in Austria, there's not really a hood. We also have places like that, but it's different here. But this was for the first time really I understood what it's about. For the first time I could smell the vibe of it all, and I really loved the track. I'm pretty sure that in the 90s it was a big hit. It was the breakthrough of Nas. That I already heard the song, but back then, like I said, I wasn't that big into hip hop. Even then, I was in the midst of my Britpop fandom in around 1996, 1997 when this came out. But I must have listened to it on the radio because it was a big worldwide hit. But I had forgotten it. But then in that Uber with that experience where it felt so real, I really thought, wow, that's a great track. And as soon as I was home 2 weeks ago, I purchased the album, which includes If I Rule the World. But I made a mistake. I thought I purchased it, but all the cover artworks for the first 3 or 4 Nas albums, they all look kind of similar. So I ordered this from Amazon and I thought this is the album with If I Rule the World, but it wasn't. It's Nostradamus, which is a different album. So I thought, oh, and then I read the reviews before I listened to Nostradamus. I wanted to read the reviews to find out, is it even a good album that I bought instead? And on Wikipedia it said it's an album, that kind of crashed his career and got very bad reviews and people hated that album. So I thought, oh dear, but still I listened to it and I loved it. So that was really strange that I thought, me as someone who doesn't really like hip hop, and then I buy the wrong album, and it's an album even fans of Nas don't seem to like, according to the internet. And I thought, oh, this is really good. If I really like this album that much, how much will I love the beloved albums, the first 3 albums? This is the 4th album. How much will I like the first 3 Nas albums? And so I bought this 3 CD collection of his first 3 albums, and like I said, all the covers look kind of similar, so I confused this cover with this cover, it looks really very similar. But this is the album with If I Rule the World on it, and it's a good album, but I have to say, for some reason I prefer Nostradamus to it, and then I listened to the 2nd and the 3rd album, and I think, to me at least, the consensus of the critics is completely different, which shows that I'm not an expert on hip hop and don't really know what I'm talking about here. But for me personally, he got better from album to album. So this with If I Rule the World on it is my 4th favorite Nas album. It's my 3rd favorite album. Then his 3rd album is my 2nd favorite album. And I really think that Nostradamus, but maybe because I have it on vinyl and it's more fun to listen to albums on vinyl, I don't know. But this was the album I enjoyed the most, and I really, really liked that album. So, since I was in this hip hop phase, I thought, what else can I get? And if you're familiar with the videos I did in the last couple of months, I'm really very much also in a Beastie Boys phase for a year now, and the one album that still was missing, apart from the last album they did, but from the classic albums, the only that still was missing is Ill Communication. So I ordered this not on Amazon, but on Discogs as well. And again, with all the Beastie Boys albums, I was always a Beastie Boys fan. Even at times when I didn't like hip hop, I still thought, the Beastie Boys transcend the genre. They're more than just a hip hop act. They're really, artists. It's really like an artist collective to me, very eclectic, and hip hop is just one of those eclectic styles they try. But yeah, this is of the classic albums from the 80s and 90s, the last that was still missing. And like all the others, I really liked it. Like all the others, very fun album. I think it's my least favorite of those first 4 albums. Well, not the debut album is its own thing, but I'm talking about starting with Paul's Boutique. So if you talk about Paul's Boutique, Check Your Head and Head on Nasty and Ill Communication. Ill Communication is only my 4th favorite of those 4. But it's still fun. It's the album with Sabotage on it. So classic in a way. And then I thought, okay, well, what can I get next? And then I thought I'd give 21st century hip hop one more chance. At the beginning of the video I told you, I completely lost interest in hip hop in the 2000s because it was just about about gangster stuff, about drugs, about sex, about crime, and I couldn't stand the things they were rapping about. But I always was familiar with that notion that Kendrick Lamar is like he's the big artist of 21st century hip hop. There are two or three others as well, but I don't think I will get. Frank Ocean isn't my type of thing. I tried some tracks by him a couple of years ago, and it's not my thing. But I was always aware that Kendrick Lamar is like the thinking man's hip hop artist of our time or of the 21st century, and I never really got around to listening to him. But then I thought, okay, now in this phase, this is the only time I'm in I have this kind of vibe where it's possible that I could get into something like that, and I did. I purchased probably his biggest masterpiece and his most well-known album, How to Pimp a Butterfly. But this is not the cover most people will be familiar with. To Pimp a Butterfly, not How to Pimp a Butterfly. This is a limited 10th anniversary edition or something, so it's a different cover than the famous one. But it's the same album, it's exactly the same album as the 2015 album. And I have to say, I really, really, really love this album. This is really a huge masterpiece to me. Nostradamus and the Nas albums, I think they're very good to excellent. Beastie Boys album is like all the Beastie Boys albums, an excellent album, but this is really a masterpiece. And I'm now finishing my series, the top 100 best albums of all time, and it's not in there because I've written down the list months ago, and would I, if you'd ask me today to write down my top 100 favorite albums of all time, this would be in it. So maybe this is the honorable mention of my top 100 best albums of all time video, or maybe it's my number 101, one could say. But I think it's even more than number 101 to me. This is an album that moved me in a way that no album has moved me in a long time. It's maybe in 1 or 2, even 3 years. I never sat down, listened to an album. I didn't expect a rubbish album because of their reputation as a big masterpiece. But since I'm not a big hip hop fan, I also didn't think that I'm going to be moved, or that that I would love to listen to this non-stop. It was more like completing, a blind spot in my record collection. But this is really this will be an album that will be with me from now on forever, I guess. I will listen many, many times in the at least next weeks to this album. It's a fantastic album. It's on one hand it's a double album, and my favorite side would be side 3, side C. So it's also the case of an album that isn't front-loaded. Especially nowadays, most albums seem to be front-loaded, but this album has really this grace and this dignity to, it opens itself up to you slowly, it emerges you slowly, and it gets better and better. And I think the second half of this album is breathtakingly spectacular. The first half already is very, very good or excellent, or even the first half is already a masterpiece. But the second half, I thought after the first half, I thought, okay, now he gave us all the hits, and it's surely it must be a front-loaded album, and I don't expect much for the second half. But then the second half is 3 times as big and as good as the first half, and it's really fantastic. I will check out all the other Kendrick Lamar albums in the foreseeable future, and I promise I won't be as arrogant about modern hip hop than I used to be for all those years. I'm now, I promise to myself and to you that I will now open up to it, and I will check out all sorts of newer hip hop artists as well. Plus I will kind of complete the blind spots of the classic 90s and 80s hip hop that I still have. There's lots of blind spots I have. And you know, I already made an appointment with a friend of mine who's on the one hand also into the music that I'm into, you know, 60s, 70s stuff, indie music, but unlike me, he was always also a big hip hop fan and expert. And he always told me, Stefan, you have to get into hip hop. You can't call yourself a pop expert or pop fan if you don't give the biggest genre of our time a chance. And I, you know, today I told him, yeah, you're right. And he will be my teacher in the next weeks. You know, he will instruct me on which albums to get and which artists to listen to. I think we will also do a video together. Hubert is his name. We will do a video together about him instructing me, to him being my hip hop instructor. There was already once a video with Hubert on my channel, but you didn't see his face because he interviewed me about the Beatles anthology, you know, Beatles Anthology 4. He made an interview with me last year, but you didn't see his face. But next week or in 2 weeks or whenever I will release it, we have to record it first. We'll have a discussion about hip hop, and Hubert will tell me things I need to know about hip hop on camera. And another thing, you know, in the midst of this recent hip hop love affair that I have, I you know, went by a record shop, and it had like a box outside with cheap records that you could buy for €1, and there was, you know, Rapper's Delight, one of the first big classics in hip hop history. That this is really old school from the early 80s. Sugarhill Gang. Of course, I was familiar with the track. That's from like The Message by Grandmaster Flash or the Furious Five. Those are like the foundational stones or steps of hip hop. But now I also have the 7-inch. Really listen to it, and yeah, it's one of those timeless classics. You know, you don't have to be a hip hop fan. Even at times when I wasn't calling myself a hip hop fan, I already loved this song, like The Message. I also loved it because of the Chic sample. You know, they sample Good Times very famously, and people who know me know that I'm a huge Chic fan. And Chic was also always a band, you know, Nile Rodgers and Bernard Edwards was always a band that I always liked, and they always had, not always because they started in 76, 77, but their 80s work, they made like 2 or 3 albums in the early 80s, was already very influenced by hip hop, so that I always had, you know, some stuff that I listened to and liked that had hip hop influences, and the early 80s Chic stuff certainly does have hip hop influences. But yeah, I will check out the real stuff more and more in the forthcoming weeks and months, and you know, this is really actually something that I myself am really curious about, and I'm interested myself if this is only like a short fling, you know, a thing, a spleen, like the next 2 or 3 months I'm a hip hop fan, and then it dies down, or maybe it's something that will stay with me. Like I said, the Kendrick Lamar album, To Pimp a Butterfly, definitely will always stay with me from now on. But we'll see about the rest. But you know, just wanted to tell you that from now on, I'm not a snob about hip hop any longer. I gained new respect for it. Thank you very much for watching. Until next time, goodbye.
Now what you hear is not a test, I'm rapping to the beat. And me, the groove, and my friends are gonna try to move your feet. You see,